daughters, and it was so emotional for me. That was the closest I've ever come to crying while I was I might cry now when I was interviewing somebody. It's because it was.
All right, guys, and welcome back. Today I thought it'd be funny to take a look back at the time when Joe Rogan overhyped Ronda Rousey, and we got some real funny gems from it all. My personal favourite was Joe crying whilst talking to her about winning, while she's just sat up as him. Can't really blame Joe too much. I mean, he was literally working for the UFC, commentating, so it makes a lot of sense for him to overhype things, and it was also at the time Conor McGregor was taking the sport to new levels. Personally, I think Ronda came at the exact right time to be the female counterpart to McGregor, and that really helped to propel her career. And I mean, she was also really good, just not for being a striker, which is where it all came crumbling down. She was also a judo champ and was really good at hitting arm bars. But anyway, it still gave us some classic moments, and even led to Joe kind of laughing about it afterwards and saying maybe he did overhype her just a bit. So we're going to start with JRE 690, which had Ronda and a coach on, and it's probably when Ronda was at her MMA prime. And just take a listen to the delusion on this one. I mean, her coach literally says she could beat any boxing champ.
There's a video, you guys, that I put up on my Instagram page that I retweeted. Just pull that shit up. There's, I think I retweeted either from Dana or the UFC. But you guys training in Brazil on the beach. One of those workout days.
Oh, the open workout.
And you fucking hitting mitts, and I was like, Jesus Christ, what the fuck is going on in your gym? Because your striking has accelerated in these giant jumps. Like every 3 or 4 months, when I watch you hit mitts, I'm like, what the fuck are they doing? Like, no, you don't see that kind of results from other fighters. There's these giant leaps from if you go back to I saw you guys hitting mitts before the Liz Carmouche fight, and you go back to before the Betch Correia fight. You're like, fucking, they're so different. It's shocking. You're only talking about a few years, but there's difference between someone who's got a decent understanding of how to throw punches to someone who looks like a fucking world champion kickboxer. This is
she
crazy
wins the
shit.
boxing world champion any given day.
It's so funny to watch this now. I mean, here's Ronda striking after this. And Rogan is hyping her up like she's the second coming of Muhammad Ali. And then a coach says she can beat any world boxing champion on any given day. Now look, it's a coach, so he's obviously going to hype her up and bend the truth a bit. But I don't think he's even being a bit hyperbole. I reckon at that point he genuinely believed it, which really should have been the writing on the wall for most people. Let's not forget Rogan went on to ESPN and said she could beat Floyd Mayweather in MMA.
This fucking speed is retarded.
Well, the thing is, people forget that when I won the title the first time, it was like my 5th pro fight.
Yo, look at after
I was just getting started.
Her
Yeah.
defense. It's not like hit and stand. It's so much different,
Well, you have a lot of striking knowledge. It's very obvious. I've seen the work you've done with Ellenberger and with Travis. In Ellenberger, there was a big difference between the way he was throwing punches and the way he was moving after he started working with you. And I could tell the way you coach her and the way you coach fighters. You know a lot of shit about boxing. There's a lot going on there with movement. But it's also, you're a very unusual athlete, Ronda. I'm sure you know this, but there's a fucking fire burning inside you that is just so much hotter than most people. The intensity that you're bringing to it, is that come from the way your mom raised you? Is that something that's always been in you?
That's another great clip. I'd love to see Rogan calling things retarded now as well. I don't think Spotify would quite like that. Calling her an unusual athlete and about how the intensity is unmatched by anyone else. You just couldn't make this stuff up. And I think people forgot about all of this, to be honest. But anyway, here's Joe getting emotional.
That was an intense moment. When you walked around the cage after you knocked her out, it was one of, I've seen guys win before, I've seen women win before, I've seen people win before, but I never saw anybody soak it all in the way you did when you walked around. When she face planted, you said, don't cry, and then you walked around like you strutted around the octagon. You strutted and looked around at all those people. You took it all in. You looked around. I was like, wow, this is a crazy moment.
I never did. That was the first time
And knowing you as long as I've had, and having daughters, and it was so emotional for me. That was the closest I've ever come to crying while I was I might cry now when I was interviewing somebody. It's because it was so intense, and it was also I really knew that I was seeing history. It's it's hard. I know it's hard for you to probably talk about it because you're living it right now, but you're in the middle of history. Like what happened there? What's going on with you right now? Like you're a part of some crazy movement right now. It's not just sport. It's like you're this very unique example for other women. Like that's never existed before. There's never been a female combat sports athlete like you. And when you went down to Brazil, knocked that girl out like that, and then we're taking it all in. It was so crazy. I was so happy for you, and it was so crazy at the same time. It was nuts. The whole thing was such a strange moment. There was a feeling in the air, and there was a recognition of what was happening that was very different for me than any other fight that I've ever called before.
Yeah, so that podcast has some real funny moments. I mean, he even says she's a unique example for other women that has never existed before, even going as far to say it was a different feeling for him than any other fight he's called before. Now, to be fair, that's his prerogative, and it might be true, but it doesn't make it any less hilarious and delusional when you take into account everything that happened after this podcast. So we'll move on to when Ronda fought Holly Holmes, and there's a lot to go over on that itself, but this is a video about Rogan, so I'll just skip over it and instead show you his funny live reaction, him hyping her up a bit beforehand. But the thing to note is this is where Ronda's legacy came crashing down, and also the whole point of her being a striker was completely dismissed when she fought Holly and got absolutely battered.
Dana, when you get a chance to watch Ronda Rousey fight, it's not just a fight at this point, it's a cultural spectacle.
Look at that face. That's the realisation you've been talking a lot bollocks, and you also have a podcast that millions of people watch, so you're going to have to come up with something quick. So he went on to do this podcast to address it afterwards. To be fair, I'm not exactly sure how long this was after that fight, but from what I can tell, this is the first time he really addressed it.
I'm not happy that Ronda Rousey lost, but in a way, it makes things easier because there was a bunch of fucking people that were going, oh yeah? What about Ronda Rousey? She'll kick in. And I made the mistake of saying, like, hyperbole, okay? I'm the master of hyperbole. I exaggerate all the time. I was like, she could probably beat half the men bantamweights in the UFC.
Is that true?
No, it's not. That's definitely not true. I shouldn't have said it at the time. Now it's definitely not true. She could beat a few that aren't good outside the sport. Look, if she gets guys in the ground, she could fuck a lot of people up. Her judo is 100% legit. Her arm bars are amongst the best in the business.
So yeah, he's definitely walking back some points here. And yeah, the bantamweight comment was just ridiculous. So at least he walked that one back. He still says she could beat some who aren't skilled, so he's still keeping one foot in and not completely accepting it. But after a few years, he addresses it a few more times. And I guess as time goes on, he has more of a clear head. He's probably, less embarrassed by it all, I suppose.
In your opinion, what happened to the young girl that was
Ronda Rousey?
Yes, the Olympian girl that all of a sudden went from the penthouse to the shithouse.
A lot of things. It's a long
She was great.
story.
I mean, I was a big follower of hers.
Amazing judo practitioner, and dominant like no one else ever in women's MMA up to that point, in the UFC at least. But there was some holes in her approach that were exposed by Holly Holm, the woman who knocked her out, the girl who head kicked her.
Yeah.
Holly had the perfect style to deal with Ronda's style. She's really strong, she's fast, she's an amazing athlete, and she is an outstanding striker. And so Ronda's thing was to charge at you like a fucking bull. And Holly just played the matador brilliantly, caught her, lit her up while she was coming in, and then eventually head kicked her and stopped her. Once you get knocked out like that, first of all, she was very confident while she was the champion. And some people would say arrogant. And because of that, there's all these people that are waiting for you to fall. There's a lot of people out there that don't have much confidence. And when they see someone who's out there who's got a lot of confidence, it's very compelling. Like a Floyd Mayweather or like a Conor McGregor, their confidence is incredibly compelling. Like you want to be near them. But those people, when that person loses, they're the first ones to attack. They're like, yeah, you fucking loser. I knew you were a loser. Like, you go to Ronda Rousey's Instagram page and read the comments under her pictures. It's ruthless. Some fucking assholes. Just assholes. And I guarantee you, all those people are severely unaccomplished.
I mean, honestly, although I'd agree, if you're taking time out of your day to go and comment something like that, you probably are a loser, to be honest. But the whole point of it all was that Ronda was just ridiculously hyped up, especially by people like Rogan. So when she lost in spectacular fashion and then went on to cry and pretty much retire, you could see why people have such an adverse reaction to it.
On someone who was this incredible, bright, shining star that fizzled out. So she lost to Holly Holm, and then she came back in a far worse matchup against Amanda Nunes. And I thought Nunes before Holly Holm beat her, I thought Nunes was the most dangerous matchup for her because Amanda Nunes is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt and she has heavy, heavy hands. She's a dangerous striker. And I was like, Ronda's going to have to close the distance or to grab her and take her to the ground. And when she does, it's no fucking picnic because Amanda Nunes is nasty on the ground. And then getting close to her, she's got knockout power with her hands. I'm like, this is a terrible, terrible matchup. And it turned out to be right because she got knocked out in 48 seconds in the rematch. But what she should have done is revamp her camp or not fight. Revamp, go to one of the masters. There's a few masters of mixed martial arts in this world. There's Faraz Zahabi and Matt Hume and Duke Rufus. There's a few of these striking mixed martial arts masters. And you have to go to them. You have to go to them and you have to like submit yourself and say, look, let's fix this. Let's fix whatever I'm doing. And let's see if we can take this to the next level because the sport evolved and the sport passed her by. Like she was at the very top, but if you build it, it's like that Field of Dreams movie. You build it, they will come. And when she built the women's bantamweight division and became this dominant force and stopped all these people and looked invincible, all those women were coming up below her and they were getting better and they were evolving and they were like the rest of MMA. They were reaching this incredibly high level, whereas the women's MMA movement in the early days, 3-4 years ago, if you watched women's MMA, the skill level was nowhere near commensurate with the men's skill level. Like the men's skill level at 3-4 years ago, they're better today, but only a little bit better. But the women are way better today than they were because it's a new thing. It's like 1997 for mixed martial arts for men. That's what like 3 or 4 years ago was. But now the women have essentially pretty much caught up or close to it. There's very high level striking, very high level submissions, very high level fluid overall mixed martial arts games that you're seeing in the women's division. And Ronda, in a lot of ways, as spectacular as she was, had a very limited approach. She didn't kick. She punched, but she wasn't necessarily like the most brutal knockout puncher, and she wasn't necessarily the most skillful boxer. She didn't really have a tremendous amount of experience. What she had was incredible athleticism, a world-class mindset. She was a world-class athlete. She's a former Olympian, and outstanding judo. Her judo and her arm bars are amongst the best in the world. Like her transitions, the way she attacks and attacks and attacks and set things up. She's phenomenally talented and really accomplished in judo. But when you want to be a world mixed martial arts champion at the highest level of the game, now you have to be great at everything. There's people like Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson, who I think is the best fighter in the world.
Yeah.
He's amazing.
Yeah.
That guy's great at everything, and that's why he's the best, because you don't know what the fuck he's going to do. You don't know if he's going to kick you or knee you or take you down or strangle you or elbow you. He's just got so many options, and he's coming at you from all different directions, and he never gets tired. He's the total full package. We don't have a Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson in women's MMA yet, but it's coming. It's coming. And Ronda's not that. Ronda's more like maybe like a Chuck Liddell or one of the early pioneers of men's MMA. Super talented, really fun to watch, but perhaps limited in their approach.
So yeah, you can see him talking objectively there. Yeah, she was world class and had outstanding judo, but wasn't a great striker and didn't throw kicks. And yeah, I think she was more like a Chuck Liddell type, who just really brought up the women's division. So it took a few years, but Rogan finally gives an honest opinion, and I pretty much agree with everything he says there. It was just overall a really funny time. I'll leave it with one last clip, which was Rogan talking about her never fighting again, and how it was a lesson to be learned, which I think is really funny too. Like yeah, probably a lesson for Rogan to have learned as well.
That would be an awesome fight to be able to revisit one day. She even said we'd do it. I mean, who knows, her career is so
I don't
open
think she's
right
ever
now.
going to fight again.
She doesn't need to.
Yeah.
She really doesn't need to.
I don't think she wants to.
Yeah.
I think, who knows? You'd have to ask her, but there's a lot of lessons to be learned in what happened to her in terms of like all of the distractions, and Hollywood came calling, and there was scripts and talk about doing Roadhouse, and there was all this shit going on that was other than fighting.
Yeah.
And then it was also, look, the sport has evolved so rapidly, and the women's MMA has gotten so high level so quickly.
So yeah, that's the video. I've got no hate for Rogan. I don't agree with everything he says, and he comes out with some hilariously bad takes. But you have to remember that the UFC at the time was going through a massive growth spurt, and it would have been exciting for anyone involved, coming from the early days and then seeing it evolve into what it is now. So he definitely got ahead of himself. So if you enjoyed, please subscribe. See ya.
We always like to use that term once in a lifetime. Once in a lifetime does not apply to Ronda Rousey. It's once ever in human history. There's never been a woman like her.